Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with Lindsey Caplan about common pitfalls around gathering and change. Lindsey Caplan, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from the Bay Area. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about common pitfalls and ways around those pitfalls in gathering in the organization and organizational change and how we can go about doing all of that more effectively. As we get started, I wanted to share Lindsey's bio with everybody. Lindsey Caplan is an organizational psychologist and communication strategist. She helps HR, marketing, and business leaders script employee experiences that help boost morale, engagement, and retention for the long term via her consultancy, The Gathering Effect. I really like that. And maybe you can just start by telling us a little bit more about The Gathering Effect, as well as anything else about your background or personal context.
Yeah, sure. So my background is a little different, maybe. I've worked across entertainment and education and business. But what all of those things have in common is I've been shaping or creating experiences that lead to creating an effect in other people. So that whether it's to entertain or inform or engage, it's always usually been a gathering. And over those 20 or so years, I've seen common patterns and pitfalls and wanted to put all that together into a business to help organizations gather their people together and create these effects that a lot of companies want.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that gathering. Why is gathering so important? I mean, I think during the last couple of years of the pandemic, where so many people have been remote and separated and socially isolated, it's been hard. And we've seen an uptick in domestic violence and in mental illness and depression and anxiety and some of those types of things that are tied to the fact that we're social animals. And so tell us a little bit more about gathering, why they can be powerful, and then we can start to talk about how we can leverage that more within our organizations.
Yeah, I mean, gathering is just so much a part of human nature and what we crave, and it's something that we do all the time for ritual and for meaning. In our companies, it's really, in my experience, the most common tool that we use to spark change or movement inside our companies. So we want people to do something differently. We tend to start by bringing them together, whether that's virtually or in person. So that looks like something like an all hands or a training class or an offsite, or I guess an onsite conference or new hire orientation. We tend to think we'll pull people in a room and we'll tell them a message, and then that will create this change. And oftentimes they sort of have a steep drop off, or that change doesn't really stick. But we can do things differently in order to actually maximize that investment and make it worth it, both for the employee but also for the business. And yeah, now that we can gather again, I think there really is this hunger for people to come together, but there's also a strong desire for them to be worth it, especially if we're used to working from home and don't have to put on pants. If we want to make that effort, if we're going to make that effort, they really have to be worth it. So hopefully the bar is higher now too.
And the point that you just made is really important. I want to key in on this, because just the fact that you have an all hands meeting and you bring everyone together, either in person or virtually, that's a gathering. But just because you do that and you roll out, you say, here's our big strategic vision, and this is the rollout of this new change initiative. This is what we're going to do. The fact that you had that all hands meeting, you had that gathering, that doesn't necessarily mean much of anything if there's no sustained effort in terms of the implementation of that change over time. And that's where so many organizations just fall flat on their face, because they put a lot of effort into that initial meeting or those initial meetings, but then a week, a month, 6 months, a year out, nobody's thinking about it, nobody's talking about it, and lo and behold, everything tends to revert back to how it was in the old status quo. And change is hard. People are naturally just resistant, and unless it's front of mind and it's part of the dialogue and the conversations that are happening, and it's built into the culture, it's not just going to magically happen. So gatherings are, yes, very important, but like a simple all hands meeting in and of itself isn't going to necessarily do anything. But multiple, kind of having an implementation strategies that involves gatherings repeatedly multiple times over the course of an extended period of time to bring people together, to get their input, to get their feedback, to share successes, to do all those sorts of things. That's where you can start to see the power of the gathering.
John, I just want to hire you and work with you to basically talk. Yes, I completely agree. A few things that you said there are extra important to key in on. But first, maybe let's just define what I mean by gathering, because we're using this term a lot. To me, gatherings are bringing people together to match a message with a moment to create an effect. So it's not just like, let's do, one-on-one or have a meeting, but it's really about, I want to bring people together and I want to share a piece of content in hopes that it moves people. And a few things you said about all hands meetings. One, I think we falsely assume that information is enough to change behavior. It's not, right? So that's one component of this.
Almost never. For most people, that will not work.
Right. But I think, we don't necessarily realize that that's the case, because for the people putting the content together, we're so interested in it. It's our content. So we don't necessarily see that someone else might not care about it unless we give them a reason to care. Secondly, this is sort of going into the pitfalls, we tend to spend a lot of time on the what, the content, and a lot less on the how. How will bring that change to people? Will people be motivated by it? Will they care about it? A perfect example is company values. I tend to see companies spend all of their time on what will our new values be, and very little time on how to bring that change to the company. And I really would suggest we reverse that formula. And then finally, you talked about multiple gatherings and sustaining the momentum. Yes, I believe that's very important. But to me, it's less about follow up and more about follow through. So are the actions that we're talking about in the gathering, are the leaders demonstrating this behavior? Is it in the business? Is it live? Is it in our reward mechanisms? Those are the kinds of things that I think are really key. So anyway, a few add-ons to your brilliant comment.
Yes, follow through is so important, and just finding ways to have it embedded into the systems and the mechanisms, the policies, practices, procedures, the daily life, the lived experience of people at work. Unless that's happening, most changes aren't going to take effect. And that's the hard work. That's the hard work of change, right?
Absolutely.
And I know you talk about gatherings as culture on display. I love that concept. Maybe describe that a little bit more for us. And what does that mean? Like, for us as organizational leaders, how can we leverage that, recognizing that gatherings are culture on display?
Yeah, I think when we move to remote or hybrid work, many of us, we have limited time when everyone's together and limited time where we're seeing leadership or seeing sort of what's expected at our company, whether it's, not on Slack, right? And so when we log into an all hands, or we log into a workshop, or we log into a values kickoff or a sales kickoff, that's a time when we're really seeing how the company acts and how they behave. We don't get a lot of time to hear and see from leadership. So these are the new signals about what we care about as an organization, because we're not seeing people in the hallway and seeing their everyday behavior. So again, I think these gatherings now have a higher bar. If we log into our weekly all hands, that can either potentially dip engagement and motivation, or it can raise it, depending on how we act and how we behave. So I think it's really due time that we're much more intentional in how we gather people.
We want our gatherings to be meaningful and to matter and to have a clear purpose, right? And when that doesn't happen, I mean, that's always been the case, but I think now, as we are really shining a light on this, the pandemic helped us realize how many stupid meetings we've been going to, how many pointless gatherings there have been in the past, and challenging the assumptions about what needed to happen just because it's always been done that way versus what actually matters. And so if you have a gathering, if you're bringing people together, recognize, I mean, there's opportunity costs there. You're bringing people away together to be away from their normal jobs and being productive and creative and innovative and whatever. There's an opportunity cost there. Not just in terms of the actual time spent, but also in terms of the morale, in terms of people's engagement. And so if you bring people in and it's a soul-sucking kind of experience, it's going to have a negative effect. It's going to dip all those positive things that we're trying to achieve. It's not going to have the effect that we want. So just make sure you're really clear-eyed about the purpose, make sure it's well-designed, make sure it's meaningful. If you can do those things, it can be an opportunity to reinvigorate people, to get them excited, to inform, yes, but also to help them see the culture in action, to walk the walk and not just say nice things or put nice things on the website or on banners, but actually do them and demonstrate them for people. That's going to do more to change and shift culture in the organization than almost anything else.
Just nodding my head. Yes, I agree. But I feel like we should tell people how to do this and not just sort of preach.
Yes.
Preach its importance. So
yeah. So let's get into that. So what can we do to design more meaningful, purpose-driven gatherings that are going to have the type of positive effect that we're looking for?
Yeah. So there's a few steps that I think we can follow. One is, like you said, to define the purpose. In my vernacular, I call it the effect. So what do we need from the people that we've gathered? What's the change that we're seeking? What's the after? What's the end that we're starting with? So for example, if we're doing a company all hands, what do we want people to walk away with? Do we want to just inform them, or need to engage? Do we want them to comply? What's the effect that we really need? And then that clarity helps us design a gathering that really leads to that effect versus just starting with the content, which is where people tend to start. And I say, don't start with the content, start with the effect. So that's the first piece of advice. And then I'll share a very brief sort of model that I've created that helps people, I think, understand the difference between engaging gatherings versus ones that are sort of meant for compliance and sort of check the box. So gatherings can either be push or pull, or they can be one size fits all or personalized. And the vast majority of our gatherings are push and one size fits all. What I advocate for is let's move the needle towards more pull and personalized when what we need is engagement. The key is when we need engagement. So push versus pull. Push, standard gathering, maybe our all hands. The employees are very passive, sitting there listening. They're not really actively involved. It's potentially mandatory. They're just sort of like a waterfall. Information is sort of washing over them, and they're expected to absorb it and retain it. Whereas pull, we're much more active. We're not necessarily doing breakout rooms, but we're asked a question. We're asked to give feedback. We're invited to participate in ways that feel comfortable. And I think these are key differences that we can use to remember that gatherings are meant to be done with people, not at people. And if you want them to be done at people, then send an email. Don't bring people together unless there's a reason for them to be there. So,
I love that point. How many of these gatherings do we have that really should just be an email or a quick Slack message or something like that? People get really frustrated when they're being brought together to do things that they know could just be quickly communicated by an email, or just do like a quick 5-minute video that you send out to people or whatever, right? So I really like that kind of a focus. and just, again, making sure that what you're doing is going to resonate with your people. Compliance. I always think about the difference between compliance and commitment within organizations. If we're trying to drive commitment in our people, that looks very different than if we're using kind of more fear-based tactics or carrot and stick for compliance. And the default in many organizations is compliance, like you said. But I don't think that's actually what they're intending. And what they really want is loyalty, commitment, engagement, those sorts of things. But they're designing the experience the exact wrong way to get what they want.
I love that, compliance versus commitment. I might steal that and credit you.
I doubt I came up with that. I'm sure someone else has said that, but it is a useful way to think about how a lot of things in organizations are set up and function. Because I'm working with an organization right now. I'm sure the top leadership would never consider themselves as trying to create a fear-based, carrot and stick, compliance-based culture. Yet that seems to be the predominant culture within the organization. And so I'm working with them to try to help them understand, like, okay, so you have these policies, practices, procedures, these types of mechanisms in place that are reinforcing a compliance mentality instead of really what you're wanting and what you're going for. So in some cases, that means you're going to have to dismantle some of those existing systems, those existing mechanisms, or to help adjust them, reframe them, whatever, so that people can see them for what your intent is. And that's a hard shift for a lot of people, especially if, for you and I'm an organizational sociologist, you're an organizational psychologist, for you and I, this is the kind of stuff we think about all the time. But so many people who find themselves in executive leadership positions or CEOs or, in those types of responsible roles, a lot of times they've come up through finance, through operations, through other areas where, they do think about these things, but it's not the sole focus or even primary or secondary focus of what they're focusing on. And then it just isn't something they don't even know where their blind spot is, because it's not something they've considered a lot. So I think it's important for us to have these conversations. I can be a change agent within my organization. I can be an external change agent if I'm going and doing consulting work, but as an internal change agent, I can drive a lot of change just by having these types of conversations. And by helping people understand, like, the impacts of what they're doing, that, oftentimes there's just unintended consequences. They have no malice towards anybody. They're not trying to create a toxic culture, yet they're doing things consistently that are creating that kind of a culture. And so just helping people to recognize and understand that in a productive way, can be really powerful. Any thoughts or additions to any of that?
Well, no surprise, I agree with you. The compliance thing is interesting. Two thoughts on that. One, sometimes compliance is okay. Sometimes if we're rolling out, a new system and we need people just to input their information, then just saying, hey, please comply here and fill out your benefits is fine. Not everything has to be engaging or engagement. But the question of, why is compliance bad? Why should we move away from compliance? Because every single time you want people to do something, you have to remind them and ask them. And that actually takes longer than engagement, which is people will do it on their own. They will tell other people, they will be your champion, they will spread the word for you. And that actually saves time and money. So, I think the choice is theirs. But yeah, a lot of organizations are really steeped in compliance, and that makes culture change challenging in many ways.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong too. You're absolutely right. There is necessary compliance, and there's lots of employment and labor law issues that you need to be compliant with internally within organizations. There's policies that you need to be compliant with, and so it's not bad to have things that people need to do and to have a compliance focus on those things. Where the danger comes in is where that becomes the overarching foundation of everything that you're doing. And to your point, I see it all the time. It's like pulling teeth. You're trying to pull teeth to get people to do simple little things because it's compliance, but people will, scale a tall mountain when it's engagement. Like, they'll go through so much effort and they'll bring people along with them if they believe in it and if they feel like it's important. And so, to the extent we can move things that direction and reframe things, it's just going to make our jobs much easier. It might be a little bit of work in the front end. I think that's why a lot of people don't do it. They just think, I'm just going to send out an email and say, do this or else. But if you can focus on the engagement piece in the long run, I think it's going to pay huge dividends.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of an analogy, probably one around like raising kids or compliant. Yeah, there's probably some analogies there, but I think we understand this concept outside of the workplace, but sometimes when we get inside a company, it can bring out the worst in us or the best in us. And it's just
the way most organizations, this is changing, by the way, more organizations are moving to flatter kind of structures and such, but the traditional organization with the pyramid hierarchy and power control models of leadership that were prevalent in previous generations, like that's changing in many places, but it's still persistent. And many people who are senior in organizations, they don't know any different. They only have lived their lives and been in a career in organizations in similar models. And so when they try to think about how to lead, most leaders have no background in leadership. They have no training in leadership. They've just kind of been thrown into leadership roles, and now they're expected to lead effectively. So by default, most of them will mimic what they've seen other people do. And it's the enlightened leaders that will go out and like proactively try to develop themselves as leaders and do those sorts of things. But a lot of people don't have time for that because they're bombarded with just constant demands on their time, or at least they feel like they're bombarded with constant demands on their time. They don't have time to invest in their own leadership development. And as such, you just have the perpetuation of some unhealthy things, even if someone recognizes it. It was interesting. There's a study recently where there was a group of people who were observed. So they all would take turns doing like a speech, like a short speech. And one person would go up and they would give their practice speech. And then everyone in the audience who also had to do their own speech, they would then critique it. And they would say, oh, you did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, all these things. And then it was their turn. They would go up, they do the exact same things wrong. All the things they just identified as wrong, they go up and do the exact same thing. And it went on and on and on. Everyone repeated the exact same wrong things that they all recognized were not effective. They all knew that they shouldn't do them, yet they did it, right? And why? Because it's so ingrained in us based on our experience and what we see other people do and how we've done things in the past and our muscle memory and all that kind of stuff, that we just tend to replicate what has come before us. Sometimes that can be healthy replication, but sometimes it can not be healthy replication. And it's the unhealthy stuff that we want to try to shift. You've already mentioned some of the types of small adjustments we can start to make today within the next week that can start to make an impact. Let's close today. I know we have just a few more minutes. Let's close today just talking and reiterating some of the key elements that anyone listening can apply immediately to start to really move the needle, to have meaningful gatherings that have the kind of effect that they're going for.
Yeah, so tangible things that people can do. The first is to get really clear on what's the effect that we're trying to create. So ask yourself, how will we know that we've succeeded, or what do we want people to know or do or be by the time we're done? If we don't have that clarity, then your employees won't have that clarity either. So that's one. Two is to consider ways to pull instead of push, and to personalize instead of do a one-size-fits-all approach. So a few key ways to do that. One is to ask a question that gets people thinking about the topic, or your all hands or your training class from the get-go, and close with key sort of calls to action or what you want people to know or do. To personalize, ask people to debrief or to think about a topic with others, or ask them to connect the topic to someone that they meaningfully care about. And the other way to personalize is a little bit harder for leaders, is to have them share why the topic is important to them and to model a little bit of vulnerability, because the difference between personalize and one size fits all is emotional involvement. What gets people to care about information is when they feel connected by it. So if our leaders aren't connected, then it's hard for us to know as employees why we should care either. So those are a few sort of tangible things that people can do. I believe gathering is a communication skill. And so if we learn how to gather well, we can learn how to communicate and affect change more effectively inside of our companies.
Yeah, very well said and summarized. And I appreciate the really practical points that we can start to do right away. Lindsey, it's been a real pleasure. I know at the time I need to let you go, but before we wrap up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Thanks, John. Yeah, people can find me at my website, which is gatheringeffect.com. And I'd love to connect with folks. So yeah, please reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lindsey. It's been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page. And please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.